Today is Thursday, November 5, 2009, and this is the start of an interview with Mr. Robert Szyska at the Macomb Catholic Services located at 15945 Canal Road, Clinton Township, Michigan. Mr. Szyska is 62 years old, and his birth date is March the 27th, 1947. Mr. Szyska currently resides at 59229 Bates Road, Lenox, Michigan. My name is Dave Rousseau, and I will be the interviewer, and Mr. Paul Wilhelm will be the videographer. Mr. Szyska, would you state for the record the branch of service that you served?
The United States Navy.
All right, Bob. Can I call you Bob?
Sure.
Let's start at the beginning. Can you give us a little bit of background about yourself, your family, and how you approached the eventual enlistment in the Navy?
Well, I grew up on a truck farm in Richmond, Michigan. I have 7 brothers and 1 sister. Come from a pretty good sized family. I grew up in a poor family, and we didn't have a lot. I had a good mother and father, took care of us. My dad always provided for us. And I graduated from Richmond High School. When I was growing up, it's funny because I used to always eat Cracker Jacks, and that's kind of what got me headed toward the Navy. The sailor on the box of Cracker Jacks. Yeah. I don't know, when I was younger, I thought if I ate a lot of Cracker Jacks, I'd probably turn into a sailor, but once I got older, I realized, no, it didn't work that way.
Now, where were you in the sequence of 7 brothers and sisters?
I am the second oldest. My brother Joe was the first one to go. He got drafted into the Army. And then I had a brother Larry who quit high school. And he went in and he joined the Navy on the Kitty Cruiser program. And then I went in. Well, I graduated from high school and then I went looking for a job. I knew I was going to get drafted. I had all the qualifications to get drafted into the Army. I wasn't crazy about the Army. I knew if I was going to go in, I was going to go in the Navy. So, graduated from high school and got a job at Bauer Roller Bearing. I didn't have a car, so I was living with some friends in Detroit on St. Clair and Kirchville, about 5 or 6 blocks from Bauer Roller Bearing, so I could walk to work. I was working midnights. So I was there just about a month, and the friends that I was staying with, they were like family. We knew them since we were little kids, and they used to come out to the farm and help pick vegetables and stuff. And my dad had worked with a gentleman, his name was Al DeGrip, and he had 2 sons and a daughter, and they used to come out and we used to play together all the time. So they were just like family. We called them Uncle Al, and Richard was our cousin. So one day I came home from work at Bauer Roller Bearing, and I was getting ready to go to bed, and their oldest son, Skip, come home, and he said, hey, he says, they're hiring at General Motors in Pontiac. He said, you want to run down there and put it in there, see if we can get an application? I said, sure. So we hopped in his car and drove down there, and we got hired in the General Motors.
Okay.
So on the way back from General Motors, we came from Pontiac, we came down Van Dyke. Well, the Sterling stamping plant, Chrysler Sterling stamping plant had just opened up. And there was a big plywood sign that said, hiring. So, what the heck? Went inside, we got hired at Chrysler's. So, Chrysler being closer, that's where I wound up. And I just retired in 2007 after 43 years, Chrysler's. So. that's
What was your job there?
Well, when I first started out, I worked in Department 9770. It was called Hell's Half Acre. It was a frame line for Chrysler cars and trucks, and the frames would all go down rail lines and come together into what they call a ladder line. And it was literally like Hell's Half Acres with all the spot welders. They were all handheld spot welders, and when you spot welded, the sparks were flying, smoke. Nobody wanted to work in that department. So in about 1976 or 77, they transferred that department to Mack Avenue, where they built cars. So everything was done there. And then they brought gas tanks, the gas tank department into Sterling Stamping from Outer Drive. And we started working on gas tanks. I was a combination repairman.
This was middle 60s, early 60s?
Yeah, 65 when I hired in. And I only worked, well, from August of 65 till June of 66, and then I went in the Navy. So I was only in the department for like 6 or 7 months before I went in the Navy. But I was a metal finisher and a welder, and then when they brought the gas tanks in, we had to learn how to weld, repair gas tanks. Then after that, they quit making in about 94, 95, they stopped making steel gas tanks. They went to all plastic gas tanks. So then I got transferred into another department, and I went on metal finishing. And I was a metal finisher until I retired.
Now, what made you decide to go in the Navy versus any place else? I mean, I can identify with you because at the time I got out, I was A1, so I had to start making plans or they would for me.
Well, I knew I was going to go, so I wanted to go in the Navy. So I headed down to the recruiter in Port Huron, and my mom took me down, and we talked to the recruiter and talked about the Navy and what it was all about. And they signed me up and told me, go home and wait for your draft papers to come, and when you get them, come back down and you'll be in the United States Navy.
So you didn't really get drafted by the Navy, you just got your draft notice and then...
No, I joined the Navy.
Yeah. Were you the first of the 7 to go?
No, my brother Joe was already in Vietnam.
Oh, he was in
He
the
was
Army?
oldest. Yes, he was in
Okay.
the Army. He was in Queen Yan, Vietnam. And that's where all the troops that came over there went in. He was in a construction battalion. They built the barracks and stuff in Queen Yan.
So none of the other brothers are in the service yet?
Larry was in. Yeah, he joined. He went in early. He quit school and went in. And he went on a kiddie cruiser.
Now, what'd your folks think about all this? That was not a pleasant time in our history, as I recall.
No, my dad was a quiet man. My dad didn't say a lot. My mom was a talker. And, she didn't discourage us. I don't think she wanted to see us go, but it's something that, it's something that we had to do.
Mhm.
And I love my country, and
Hmm.
I would go back and defend it right now if I had to.
All right, so you come off a truck farming background, one of 8 children, you enlist in the Navy. What was your first experiences in boot camp? What were they like? Can you remember?
Well, boot camp was great. It was just like if you were going through high school.
Mhm.
I mean, you're learning stuff, doing different stuff, and you're busy round the clock. It's just not going on a job and going to work for 8 hours and then going and laying down. And I mean, they got you. You're standing watches. They got you guarding dumpsters. guarding the barracks at night. So there's not a lot of free time other than when you're sleeping, polishing your boots and stuff like that. And marching, whoa, I never marched so much in all my life. But it was a good experience.
What do you think the marching was all about, since maybe people don't usually have to march?
Well, I think it was physical fitness, getting in shape. I grew up on a farm, so I was like, when I graduated, I was only 139 pounds. I was 6'1", 139 pounds, so I was kind of spindly, but I was pretty strong. And I think when I joined the Navy, I was about 157. And it's getting discipline and physical fitness, getting you ready for what you're going to do. when you get in.
Did you know at that point where you were going to go yet?
Yeah, I pretty much knew I signed up for brother duty. So I was going where he was, and he was in Reconnaissance Tech Squadron 6, and they were in Vietnam. They were on the USS Constellation at the time.
Wasn't there some ruling that came down that they weren't going to let families serve at the same time?
No, that was more or less for putting, like, if I had 6 brothers and they were all in the service, putting us all on one ship. It wasn't, Joey was in Queen Anne, Mike was in Germany for a while, and then he went to Da Nang, and me and Larry were together.
How soon after that did your younger brothers begin to go into the same place, go into the service?
I was the third one, so Mike went in shortly after I did, and he enlisted.
Where?
He went to Germany.
So in the Army?
Yeah, in the Army.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about the rest of them?
None of the rest of them ever
Had to go, huh?
No.
So
They never
we're-
had to go, and they never wanted to.
We were through with all the police actions for a while, eh? Now, do you remember any experiences in boot that might be interesting to talk about?
Just,
Even some instructors that might have stuck out for you?
for our first class petty officer, he was our drill instructor. He was our company. I was in company 395, and they were great. They were great people. Just like when I went in a regular Navy in the squadrons, even the officers, you could walk up to them and talk to them, and I was enlisted. The officers were just, they treated us just like we were the same as them. They were really, really great.
How long was boot?
From June to I got out in September out of boot camp.
3 months.
The reason I can remember that is because I was getting married when I got out of boot camp. And then they come out with.
So was this a high school sweetheart?
No, I had met her when my brother Joe was home on leave. We were cruising around Port Huron. He was with a buddy that he was in the Navy with, or in the Army with, and we were headed out of Port Huron, and this car come up behind us and flashed the lights, so we pulled over, and there was two girls in a I think it was a '66 Pontiac Le Mans. And they knew the guy that my brother Joe was with. I was just tagging along. I was the third leg. So they got out, I was sitting we were all in the front seat. And I think we were in my brother's. He had a 64 Impala. We were all in the front seat. And they got out and walked back and started talking to the girls, and I just sat in the car. So they talked to him for a while, and then they came back and we took off. So I guess they hooked up with them at another time, and then they left and went back to the Army. So here I am, I'm cruising around Port Huron one night, and this girl pulls up alongside of me, and I looked at her, and she looked at me, and we started talking, and one thing led to another. Well, she called me, she said, "You're stuck up." I said, "No, I'm not stuck up." She said, "Yes, you are." She said, "The other night when we stopped and talked to your brother and the other guy, she said, you never got out and come back." I said, "Well," I said, "they told me to stay in the car, so that's where I stayed." So, and we wound up getting married, started going out.
What was it like in Boot? Were you, I mean, was this war issue in Vietnam
No.
an issue yet, or no?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, it was, Vietnam was going strong. I knew I was going to Vietnam. Not right in country, but.
What was it like when you came home on leave? Did you feel the same kind of issues in front of you as we used to see in the newsreels?
No, I never ever one time got treated bad by anybody. I think it was different out there, being from a small town.
Uh-huh.
And there was a lot more, I think, respect.
What was your first assignment out of Boot?
Well, I went home I went on leave for, I forget how long it was, 2 or 3 weeks, and got married. And then I had a plane ticket from Metro to Traverse Air Force Base, California. And the USS Constellation was already out in Vietnam, in the Gulf of Tonkin. So they flew me from Traverse Air Force Base nonstop to the Philippine Islands, Subic Bay.
What is the Constellation?
It's an aircraft carrier.
CBS?
Yeah, CVA.
CBA?
Yep, CVA 64. I have a book right here. Cruise book from USS Constellation. They were already out there, but when I got into Subic Bay and I got checked in, when you get out there, the ship is out at sea, and they're not going to fly you out there. So they put you in transit. So what transit is you have to sign up each day, and they put you on work detachments. There may be one day out of the week that you have free, off. You can go swimming, and the Subic Bay was big. They had horse riding, back riding stables, tramp and skeet ranges, and all kinds of stuff to do. So I was there, I think it was for 2 or 3 weeks in transit before the ship come in. And they send you on work details. You might be working on roads, picking up trash, painting, stuff like that. They keep you working. And then when the ship came in and I went aboard the ship, we were only in port 2 days, and emergency, USS Forrestal, and they had a fire. So they had a real bad fire. So we got called out, so they weighed the anchor and we left. And when I signed up for brother duty and got out of boot camp, they assigned me, they messed up my orders, and they put me in ship's company on the USS Constellation. So I wasn't in the squadron.
So as yet, you didn't really have a specialty that you were...
No, I was just an airman, or seaman. When you get out of boot camp, you're a seaman. You don't get your rate till you get into the squadron. But they put me in ship's company, and when they get you in ship's company, they don't want to let you go. So got hold of my brother, and he went to the commander of the squadron, and the commander of the squadron said, no. He said, you're going to be in Reconnaissance Attack Squadron 6 with your brother. And we only had like a month to go before we were heading back. That was in November of '66. So we were getting ready to come back, but we were still out at sea. So the company commander said, "Don't worry about it." He said, "It's going to take a while." He says, "But you'll be in the squadron with us. We'll get your orders changed." So it went through. I guess they went through a lot of paperwork. So we came in out of the Gulf of Tonkin into port in Subic Bay and prepared, and we left back for the United States. And that was in November of '66. And we got back to San Diego, which was the home port of the USS Constellation, and I was still in ship's company. So when we got back to San Diego, the squadron offloaded everything. They fly the planes off and they flew back to Sanford, Florida. And all the squadron gear is offloaded onto semis. And I won't forget the name of the company that did it. It was called Navajo Joe. Did all the trucking for the Navy. And they would truck all the squadron gear back to Sanford, Florida. And then the squadron personnel, they would fly them back on C-130s. And that was a trip in itself. First trip I ever made when I got in the squadron on a C-130. It takes 8 hours from Sanford, Florida to San Diego. And when you get off that thing, your head feels about that big. Noise, vibration, it's terrible.
Is this the cargo?
Yeah, it's a cargo plane. There's no seats or nothing. All you got is parachute seats along the side. So, and then your gear is all stacked in there. Once they take off, if you want to sleep, you just climb up on the sea bags. They're all piled in there and everything. That's what you slept on. And vibrate, them things shook and vibrated. They were terrible. But that's how we got back and forth.
So what's the next step now?
It took about a month and a half for me to get out of the before I finally got my new orders. And they wound up doing, because they made a mistake, they gave me like 2 weeks liberty vacation so I could go back home and spend some time with the family, got my wife, and we drove down to Florida, and I checked into Reconnaissance Attack Squadron 6, NAS Sanford, Florida.
So you flew out of Florida to go home?
No, I flew out of San Diego, California.
Oh.
And flew home. Had vacation and then traveled
Come back to Florida.
Down to Florida by car.
So did you have off-base housing, is that?
We found a small apartment, like a studio apartment, when we got down there and got set up.
So where did you go from there now?
Well, the way it works, you spend 6 months on land on the base, and then you get sent to another carrier. So we knew that in 6 months we were going to the USS Ranger. And I forget exactly what month it was, like April or May of 1967. We left on a cruise, flew out to California in the C-130s. We took all our gear and everything, and we went aboard. We were in Alameda, California. The Ranger was in home port in Alameda, California. So we picked up the Ranger in Alameda. My wife, she came back up to Michigan, shipped everything.
So how long were you going to be on the Ranger now? Is this a 6-month deployment?
Yeah, they're 6-month deployments. Unless something happens, sometimes you'll go 7 months, they'll extend them. And
And where was their territory, the Ranger?
Where did we go?
Yeah,
Went to Gulf of Tonkin.
back to the Gulf, eh?
When you go over on a cruise, you sail out of Alameda and you go to, first stop is Hawaii. And you pull into Pearl Harbor, which is a fabulous experience. You pull in, the Arizona Memorial is there. You dock right across from it. And
Was the Missouri there yet?
no, the only thing that there was there then was, the Missouri was sunk, wasn't it?
It was the battleship where they signed the surrender in Tokyo Bay.
No,
And they moved that out, and it's right near the Arizona.
Oh, it might have been there. I didn't see
Might have
it.
been early for that, I think this is.
When you go into Pearl Harbor, you only stay in there like 3 or 4 days, take on supplies. Sometimes they'll fly, like we had 6 aircraft in the squadron, 6 planes. And when you get ready to launch them, if you have a problem and you can't launch one, then somebody has to stay behind and repair it. And then they'll launch it and fly it out they'll fly it to Hawaii and land it at Pearl Harbor. And then they have to use cranes and they'll load it onto the carrier. But take out supplies, and then what you have, when you pull out of Hawaii, you have carrier qualifications. It's just like if you go out, it's just like you're in Vietnam. They have all the planes are loaded, fully armed, and it's just like if they launch and recover aircraft just like they do if you were in Vietnam. It's getting ready to go over to the Gulf of Tonkin. So that lasts about 2 weeks, and then you come in and pick up more supplies, and then you leave there and head over to Subic Bay. The next stop is Subic Bay in the Philippines. You pull in there, if there's any work that's got to be done on the ship or anything, they do it there, and after that's all done, then you pull out and go to the Gulf of Tonkin.
What do you do in the Gulf of Tonkin, and what's the routine?
12 on and 12 off.
12 on, 12 off.
And you work 12 hours. You either work the night shift or the day shift.
So now what's your job?
I'm in corrosion control. I paint
That's paint and chip?
painting airplanes. No chipping.
No.
Oh, no, not on aircraft. These aircrafts I think they were the most expensive aircraft on the ship. They with the cameras, and they carried no armament, our planes, our jets. They carried the only armament that was on the plane, the pilot carried a 45 or a 38, whichever he preferred. Some of them carried 2.
So their mission was generally just surveillance?
Surveillance, and yeah, they would fly surveillance, and then after the bombing runs were done, our planes would, about 15 minutes after the bombing runs, our planes would fly in and photograph everything that was bombed. I mean, take a photograph 10,000 feet, and they could identify you on the ground, cameras they had. And they had infrared and PECM and DECM, which is heat. They could pick up, they could fly through there in the daytime and find out where the trucks were parked, where they had them concealed just from the heat of the engines. And at night, they could pick up the spark plugs firing on the trucks.
Okay.
And they were going down the Ho Chi Minh Trail.
Now, how far up are they in the,
10,000 feet.
that's all, it's just 10?
10,000, sometimes they went lower, sometimes they went in lower than that. Depended on the mission, what they had to photograph. But the Vigilante was one of the most lost planes in the Vietnam War, because at the start of the war it wasn't so bad, because they knew they didn't have the SAM missiles and all that yet. So once that China and Russia supplied them with SAM missiles, then they started losing more of the planes. Because they could fly high enough, they could avoid the flak and that.
Now, how big a flotilla are you in? The Ranger has probably got 20, 30 ships along with it?
No, not that many. I'd say 7 or 8. A couple of tin cans, a couple of destroyers, supply ship, and submarine.
Mm-hmm.
Submarine follows carrier wherever it goes. There's always a sub with it. I never knew that till I got out of the Navy. But yeah, there's always a submarine follows that carrier. And that carrier never stops. When you're out there, the carrier never stops. It's always moving. Even unreps. I mean, you're 20 knots side by side with a refueling ship. Unrep ships of food, supplies, ammunition, bombs. It's amazing. It's amazing to watch the ship's company guys. See, I was part of the air group. The ship's company guys, how they can transfer all the bombs and all the fuel and all that stuff. Transfer people in a little basket between ships. It's pretty amazing. And some of us, it depended on your rate. When the squadron went aboard ship, you were part of the ship now. You weren't a separate unit. You were a separate squadron, and you had your duties to do and your function. But you were also part of the ship's company. And so many people had to go. They had to work. They were taken out of the squadron, and they had to work like in the laundry, on the mess decks, different shops, you know.
You didn't have enemy aircraft as a problem, but I'm sure you must have encountered some seagoing interference from time to time.
Not too much seagoing at first. On the Constellation, when we were out there, the Vietnamese, they had a rinky-dink Navy, and they were sending a barge out to try and get to the aircraft carrier, and they sent a Phantom up, wiped that out. No, never got attacked. We had more problems with the Russians flying around, Russian bears. They would, and then you would encounter. What you would encounter out there is, they call them fishing boats. They look like porcupines because they had all these antennas coming out of them. And these people had these little boards that were about this long. And they'd unload all these people and they'd be out there sitting on these boards fishing. They'd have a basket sitting on there and they'd be fishing, catching fish. But these fishing boats all got big antennas sticking out so you know what's going on. And they'd always be in our way when we start launching. And the ship would have to move around to get around them. But a lot of times the people got dumped off their little boards from the wake from the carrier. But they were out there watching us. And then we had the Russian bear, Russians would fly their bears, and the bison would fly around when we were launching, watching. And we had a F-4 Phantom on the flight deck that was always, would sit there just for that purpose. When they come over, they would launch that Phantom. He would go up there and fly around them, look at them. He'd be flying underneath them and they open their bomb bays up. You could have flew that Phantom right up in that.
No kidding.
Russian bear, that's how big it was. Yeah. But
They used to send up single fighters at a time, eh?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, these
Nothing
bears
else.
weren't considered armed and dangerous. They were just probably
I don't-
picture taking and,
I don't know if they were armed or not, if they had bombs or what. They never, yeah, they just fly around and watch us while we were launching and recovering.
Mhm.
I imagine, especially on the launches, they would be out there flying around. let them know we're coming.
Now here you are, a little old country boy, way up in
I was
the
dumb.
north of nowhere.
Dumber than a
And
stick.
now you're out in the middle of the ocean and you're on this big carrier and what do you feel like? What are you thinking?
It's amazing. The first feelings I had was going back to boot camp, going down to Fort Knox and getting sworn in and everything, and walking down this aisleway and all these guns are coming out, they're shooting you in the arms. You're ducking, not knowing what's gonna happen next, you know, and then they sign you in and they load you on a bus and we're headed to Great Lakes, Illinois. You talk about a long, lonely trip. I said, what, you know, you don't know what you get, or what you got into.
But sitting out there in the middle of the ocean, isn't that a little scary?
No, didn't. No, it never fazed me. I never was scared. The only time I was scared was in '69 on the Enterprise when we had the fire, the bad fire. That was scary. But, no, you're busy. You're always working on planes, and when you're not working, there's so many things you can do on an aircraft carrier. You can go down to Hangar Bay and play basketball. They had movies.
That's probably part of the game, is to keep you
Dogs.
occupied.
Oh yeah, you're always busy. When you're not sleeping, you're busy doing something.
So you come back from this deployment, then when you come back, where do you go?
We came back they closed the base in Sanford, Florida, and moved up to NAS Albany, Georgia, which was Air Force. It was an Air Force base, a B-52 base. And they still, when we got up there, they still had one B-52 bomber there. That was there all the time I was there. I don't know why they kept it there, but they had a crew and everything that took care of it, and they kept it there even when the vigilante squadrons took over the base.
How'd you keep in touch with home?
Just letters, and once in a while we'd call.
Oh, yeah?
We'd call.
So there were provisions aboard ship where you could...
If you had an emergency or something, I don't recall them having phones on the ship that you could go like a telephone, a payphone, you could call up, go use a payphone, but when you come in the port, they had phones in Subic Bay on the base that you could call home. I think you were allowed so much time you could talk.
So at this time, your wife is back home in Port Huron?
Marine City.
Marine City?
She was from Marine City. Yeah.
How did she handle all of this?
Not very well. It didn't work out. I was divorced in '69.
Oh, mercy.
Yeah, it didn't work out.
Do you think it had to do with the long deployments and...
I don't know. I don't know if it was deployments or so much her. It was...
being alone and...
Yeah, being alone, she got lonely and she started going out. Then I came back up when we got back in October '68. I went on leave. I think it was '68. We come home for Christmas. My brother and I. He had a '61 Ford or '60 Ford Fairlane, and we drove back up from Georgia back home for Christmas. And we got up here and she had a boyfriend.
Oh, yeah.
So we kind of got to talking and everything, and I figured, well, I'll give it one more shot. Talked to her, and I figured if I got her out of that situation there, so I took her down to Georgia, and then it got worse after that. So there was a Marine base down there.
So what's your next deployment then after you come back from this 6 months? Is it normally 6 months on, 6 months off, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Basically, it may vary a month or two, depending on.
So what's the next deployment? Where does that
We
take
were
you?
supposed to go on a med cruise. And we were getting ready to go on a cruise, getting ready to deploy, and got a call that we were going back out Gulf of Tonkin.
Oh, my.
Yeah, so never made it on a med cruise. It was like 2 times we were supposed to go on a med cruise, and every time we went, something happened.
Well, this would have been on a different
So,
ship then.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, each,
because you're on a different
yeah.
part of the world.
The second cruise was on the USS Ranger. And then the third cruise, we wound up on USS Enterprise, nuclear powered aircraft carrier.
The Forrestal was nuclear powered too, wasn't it?
No,
No?
this was the first nuclear powered aircraft carrier right here, USS Enterprise. CVAM 65.
Why were you always on a carrier? Was that because of your rate or?
No, because of the squadron I was in.
I see.
We were photo reconnaissance. It was,
You don't know how lucky you are
oh yeah, I do.
on
I
a
do.
carrier.
I sit back and think how many times, you know, what the men were going through and the guys were going through in Vietnam. It was terrible.
Did
I had a brother in Da Nang. He's Purple Heart.
No.
It was. That's the one I'd like to get in here to get him interviewed. They were hauling sand in to Da Nang on a run for the runways, and his truck hit a landmine, got blown up. It messed up his back and his legs. But a bunch of trucks on it, they had to come across a bridge. Most of the trucks, his was the second truck, and he made it across. The other trucks didn't.
When you're on these cruises, obviously there's no way for you to get time off, liberty somewhere, so your liberty comes pretty much when you're in your off?
No, we stay out there, like you'll stay out there for maybe a month and a half, and then you'll come into port for a couple of days.
Okay,
They may stay in port 2-3 days.
so that's liberty if you
Yeah.
want to call it that.
Yeah.
What do you do, just kind of walk around and sightsee,
Oh,
or?
it's amazing. There's, the bases, Subic Bay was, like I said, horse riding, trap and ski, bowling alleys, movies. If you wanted to go into Longapole, which is another story at another time. Terrible situation over there. I didn't go into town that much. But you could go into town and you could get pictures taken, and they fix some things up and make you look like Errol Flynn.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I used to have some pictures. My first wife, she got rid of everything I had. When I come back in '68 off the Ranger, she had what was left of my possessions in the back of the car. And we said our goodbyes right there. And I moved into the barracks, and she moved in with her Marine boyfriend. And I went on leave and come up and filed for divorce. And I think we got divorced, and that's the last I seen her.
Now, you're still staying in touch with home?
Oh, yeah.
How's your mom doing with?
Letters. Yeah, they're doing good. Hard workers. My mom. My dad was a hard worker. I mean, he worked for like 20 years for Motor Products in Detroit, and when I come home from work one afternoon, and went in the next morning, and everything was padlocked shut. They closed it up.
Wow.
So, no job. My dad was a buffer and polisher. He used to buffer and polish Cadillac bumpers back when bumpers were bumpers.
Yeah.
Be a two-man job, buffer bumpers. He'd come home and he'd be covered with that rouge and stuff from Buffing compounds. And after that, you know, my dad grew up on a farm too, and started farming. And we used to take our stuff to a small farmer's market on Shane and Ferry Street, called Ferry Market. The
Oh.
market is still there.
You're talking about Detroit?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness, yes.
You know where it's at?
Sure.
We had a stall.
Oh, yeah, that's Eastern Market.
No.
Or right there?
It's on Shane and Ferry Street.
Okay,
Eastern Market is down off of Russell.
okay.
Winder. This was a small, Shane and Ferry is a small market where you sold everything by, like a retail.
Mhm.
Sold everything by the quart or the
Yep.
pint, the bushel or peck. Where Eastern Market, we took stuff down, we used to go to Eastern Market too when we had a lot of stuff. And you sell that by, you may sell 10 or 15 bushels of this
Yeah.
at one time. But, and Ferry Market was only open on Wednesday and Saturday. And Saturday was the better day.
Yeah,
And it was like open from 6 to 6. And we had a stall in there. So we were always busy on a farm. And as soon as you were old enough to pick up a hoe, out there pulling weeds and getting stuff ready for market.
so what do you do when you guys, most of you guys were gone?
I still had, like I say, 6 more brothers, 5 or 6 brothers at home. They all worked hard, they all worked on a farm. Dad say, don't work, don't eat.
So let's go back now, you're on your second deployment. Anything unusual or any experiences that are worth noting?
Yeah, the USS Ranger. That was when, well, one of the things, Bob Hope come aboard.
Oh, I was gonna
In
ask you about that.
Yeah, we were out there for Christmas in 67. And Bob Hope come aboard, Raquel Welch was with him. Yeah, that was a good time. Put on a big show up on the flight deck. Then after that, after they left, other big thing was when the Koreans seized Pueblo.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and they pulled us off the Gulf of Tonkin and took the Ranger up into the North Sea. Well, our planes weren't bombers or fighters, didn't have any armament on them, so they offloaded all our vigilantes and took us to, they didn't take everybody from the squadron, but took so many people from each department, and we were sent to Atsugi, Japan. They offloaded, they flew our planes to Atsugi, Japan, which was a Japanese, it was American installation, but at one time it was a Japanese zero base. That was an experience. When they flew us off the plane, off the carrier, when we landed in Atsugi, Japan, there was 27 inches of snow on the runway. We were coming and they were trying to clear the runway, and when we landed, they went to feather the engines on the plane, and the one side didn't feather, and we were going down the runway sideways. And the lights were whizzing by, we're saying our prayers and saying our goodbyes, and we wind up off the end of the runway in the big snow. Luckily, there was all snow was piled up and it stopped us. But,
So how long did you stay there?
oh, I don't know exactly how long we were there. We were there for maybe 2 or 3 weeks. The carrier went up, and before we left the ship for Atsugi, Japan, I got up in the morning and went out. We were heading up toward the North Sea, toward Korea, and I never seen so many ships in all my life. There was the Canadian Navy was out there, the Russians were out there, and all them Russian ships were following us. It was amazing to see all the different ships. And
What
the
was the
Russian
purpose of that big grouping?
Well, we had all our ships going up, and the Russians were following us to see what we were doing. but their ships look just strikingly like our ships. They're all painted gray, the same color. The only difference is our ship numbers are on the bow, their ship numbers are at midship. So that was pretty amazing.
Was it hard to distinguish where they were from, the country, when you see the ships?
No, they were flying their flags.
They were all flying their flags?
Yeah, they flying their flags.
Yeah, I imagine that was kind of important to keep the flags flying, to keep them from...
Yeah, they, was a lot of ships.
So when you left Japan, what was the next
Well, we left
exciting
Japan,
trip?
come back to the Ranger and finished our deployment in the Gulf of Tonkin and came back to, like I say, we come back to NAS Albany, Georgia, which was a big base. I mean, the hangar, the B-52 hangars, like, you could put 3 of our jets in one B-52
Must have been big.
hangar. Yeah, it's amazing. And the base is still down there. It's not a base anymore. They closed it up. After I got out of the service in 1970, I kind of lost track and, you know, of what went on down at the base, but they made a move from in probably 74, 75, they closed that base, and they took the squadrons down to Key West, Florida, to Key West Naval Air Station. And that's where all the vigilantes were. There was 11 vigilante squadrons. They were all on NAS Key West. And like 76, 77, they started decommissioning vigilante squadrons. They were going out. The satellites were coming in. They were starting to do everything with satellites.
We're getting close to...
The Vietnam War was starting to end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So are you ready to get shipped home yet?
No. I got out in 70. When we come back on the Ranger into NAS Albany, Georgia, I had one more cruise to go. I had enough time left. My brother Larry got out. He was 2-year kiddie cruiser. He got out at the end of the Ranger cruise, and then he left. I had one more cruise to go. Yeah, I knew I was going, but like I say, we thought we were going on an East Pack, and we wound up on another West Pack out the Gulf of Tonkin. And when they told us, he said, we got good news and we got bad news. They got us all together in the squadron and said, we got good news and bad news. He said, we're not going on, the bad news is we're not going on a May cruise, we're going on another West Pack. He said, the good news is they're not flying you out on C-130s. They're bringing a commercial airliner in. They're gonna fly you to the West Coast. We had stewardesses,
Oh, wow.
drinks, you know. Yeah, they flew us out the West Coast, and we went aboard USS Enterprise in Alameda, California.
You have some patches here. You want to share with us what the patches were for?
Yeah, this is a base patch from NAS Albany, Georgia.
Hold it up again, please. Okay.
This is from NAS Albany, or no, this NAS Sanford, Florida. This one here is from NAS Albany, Georgia. This is from the USS Constellation, first aircraft carrier I was deployed to. And then the USS Ranger. And the last deployment cruise was on the USS Enterprise. And this is my squadron. That was our squadron decal for Reconnaissance Attack Squadron 6.
Do you have any pictures you want to share with us?
Yeah, I have. This is at the Naval Air Station Sanford, Florida. They have a static display down there.
Now, when was that taken?
Probably about 3 years ago, 4 years ago.
So was that your boy?
No, my grandson.
Oh, my goodness.
My daughter, and he looked just like me when I was this age.
What did it feel like going back to a place you'd been years before?
We had some friends down in Zephyr Hills, Florida, and we took on our way down, we detoured and we went to Albany, NAS Albany, and it's a manufacturing facility. There's a big Miller Brewing Company plant on the base. But the barracks are still there that I stayed in. We drove around the base. Most of the buildings are still there. The chow hall, the barracks, the chapel, the hangars, they're all still there. So it's just like seeing the old base, but no planes. And then we went down to Sanford, and they didn't have this down there yet. This, they built this, it was afterwards. The base was there, but it was part of Orlando International. And,
Can you get that?
you could go on the base, but they didn't have the static display.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, it was a good feeling to see the base. Yeah.
Bring back some memories?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I wasn't in Sanford that long. I was only in Sanford like 2 months before we deployed, and then.
So that whole thing is just a museum now, eh?
No. It's part of Orlando NAS Sanford,
Oh, you told me
Florida is
that.
part
Okay,
of
yes.
Orlando International Airport. You fly in there.
Well, you got one picture here of a museum.
This I went on,
That's another,
last June, I went on to a reunion of Vigilante,
okay, what's this one?
RBH Navy. That's a Naval Air Museum in Pensacola, Florida. That's where the reunion was. This plane is at the Naval Aviation Museum. This plane was from RBA 6. There's not many of them left. They have one there, so it made it nice. That's the first reunion I've ever been to. They've had reunions before, but I never knew when they were or where they were at.
When you came home, what'd you do for work? Was your job waiting for you? Oh,
Yeah,
great.
I left, I took a military leave of absence from Chrysler's, and when I went back, I went right back into my same job, same plant.
And you had a daughter and a grandson, so you must have remarried down the road somewhere?
Yeah. When I got out of the Navy in 1970, I went back to work at Chrysler's and was working and met a guy from Richmond that was working there too, and we started driving together, switching off driving. And one thing led to another, and I met his daughter. But I had known her, they moved to Richmond in 1965. And she's 4 years younger than I am. So in 1965, I was 19, she was, what? So that made her 16, so 15 or 16. And I had seen her around town. You know, it's a small town. You know just about everybody in town. They lived right in town and I lived out on the farm. But I knew her from town, I had seen her. And then I left and come back in 1970. And went back to work at Chrysler's, and met her dad at work and got to talking to him. I knew him real good. He was in another department. He wasn't in the same department. I got to talk to him, we started riding back and forth, and then she would bring him up to Muttonville, and when the days that I was driving, and she would drop him off and pick him up in the evening, and one thing led to another, and we got together, and we went together for like 2 years, and then we got married in 1973.
Well, thank you very much, Bob. I appreciate you sharing with us everything you have. Maybe we'll have some time before you leave to go through some of your books. This is great to be able to go back through and see some of these books. Any other things you want to tell us?
No, that's pretty much about it. It was like the Enterprise. I wish we could have talked more about that. That was devastating, what happened on that ship.
Yeah.
But it was an experience. You know, you don't know what you're getting into when you join the military. What a great experience.
Sounds like you
I
took full
saw-
advantage of it.
Yeah, I saw places in this world that I would have never seen. Went down to Singapore, Hong Kong. Singapore was amazing. You pull in the harbor and you have to take boats in, you get off the boat. And this is back in 1969. You get off the boat in Singapore, it's a British colony.
Mhm.
You walk down the streets, there's McDonald's, a Burger King. Walk around the corner, there's guys with baskets on the sidewalks, snake charmers. They're playing their little things, and the cobras are coming up out of the boxes. Basket. It's amazing. They had a racetrack over there that was all the jockeys were females. They're all female jockeys. We had one guy that liked to bet the horses in that. We went to the racetrack one day when we were there, and it was amazing. Amazing. It's all female jockeys. Hong Kong, beautiful. That time it was British colony, and it was divided by a wall. Communist China on one side, and British on the other. Beautiful, amazing. Japan. Experiences in Atsugi, Japan, old base like